Welcome to the STEM Pathways with Rohan Sharma podcast, where we dive into the exciting world of science, technology, engineering, and math. In each episode, we share exciting stories, groundbreaking research, and inspiring interviews with experts and enthusiasts who are pushing the boundaries of innovation. Whether you're a student or professional, or just curious about how the world works, join us as we explore the endless possibilities of STEM. Let's get started. Today, I'll be interviewing Sydney Ring, who's currently an MD candidate at UW Madison. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm doing good. So to get started, I wanted to ask what made you want to go down the pre-med route in the first place?
Yeah, and that's an interesting question too, and I get that a lot. And I don't, it's interesting, I don't have one distinct defining event that happened that, was one of those moments where I'm like, this is what I need to do with the rest of my life. It was more so, honestly, almost something that I always knew that I wanted to do. And I think it was just a process of like trying out different things to see if there are other, career paths that I liked more than the idea of medicine. And I was just never able to convince myself of anything but medicine. So I had probably wanted to be a doctor since, gosh, I was, elementary school. And I think that just grew and grew more so with experiences through high school and then throughout college. But I did come into college knowing that I wanted to go into medicine.
Yeah. So what did you major in?
Yeah, so I think it was nice knowing that I wanted to do pre-med kind of coming into college. So I was looking for a major that was something I was interested in, but also something that covered a lot of the pre-med requisites that you need to apply to medical school. So initially for me, that was biology. So I initially majored in biology, and I was also really interested in global health. So I added a global health minor. And then actually through that, I was able to do my study abroad in Ghana. And then, gosh, I think it was either my sophomore or junior year of college, I realized that I was really interested in biochemistry and nutritional science. So I ended up meeting with advisors and then adding a nutritional sciences major as well.
Yeah. So for pre-med students going into college, do you have any advice when it comes to choosing their major?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's there's a lot of different ways to be able to get the prereqs that you need. Obviously, there's the certain classes that you need to take, the organic chemistry, and so on. But you can always take those classes independently. So I would say choose something that you find is interesting to you. I think that's important. I think it's also, it's nice to choose a major too that does cover all the bases, that you're not going out of the way to get those prereqs. But also, I mean, certainly flexibility too, and in adding a second major. One of my best friends, she's a resident physician now, but she double majored in English and biology, and she loved English and she did that. So honestly, whatever you're interested in too, there's flexibility and there's ability to add what you're interested in as well.
Yeah. So before doing this podcast, I went through and kind of looked up what the big things are that students tend to focus on during their undergrad when applying to med school.
Yeah.
And I guess it, for the most part, kind of sums up to grades, your MCAT, volunteering and working, research and other extracurriculars, and then obviously the application stuff, so like essays and whatever.
Yeah.
So I kind of wanted to go through and ask what your experience was like with each of these things. So obviously you need really good grades these days to get into medical school. How was it majoring biology and keeping a high GPA?
I mean, obviously, I think the challenges of undergrad as a pre-med student, as you had mentioned, there's so many different kind of parts of your application that you need to put together, and grades is big part of it, but also just being incredibly, being well-rounded. So I think it's hard because you're working, you're volunteering, you're doing all these things, and then also maintaining, relatively, big, core science courses. Um, but I think it's just really important in doing that and in balancing time. I think making sure that you're prioritizing doing all of your coursework, but also, being able to make time for the other things that you're doing. And obviously this is a really roundabout way of me saying it's just I don't have necessarily like fantastic advice. I think it's all so personalized to individual students in the way that they study and the way that they're successful in classes. I think really, taking advantage of all resources that whatever your university has available, if those are study groups, if they're, meeting with TAs, I found that incredibly helpful. I loved going and sitting down with TAs and going over any homework or assignments that I had. I think that's all really important. But I mean, always asking for help, always trying to figure out new ways that you can, be engaged and kind of learn more about the course is important. But it's figuring out what works best for you, I think is important. And then just having, good time management skills as well. Yeah.
Yeah. And then I was also going to ask about the MCAT, but do you think that's also super personalized with how people need to study for it?
I think it is. I mean, there's so many resources that are available, and I think that's one of the really overwhelming things in studying for some of these, medicine exams is there truly are so many resources out there, and I think it's hard too when you ask people, and you can ask 20 people, and everyone's going to tell you something different about how, what the best way to study is or how they like to study, and sometimes it can, it can be almost hurtful too, asking so many different opinions because it's just you just get so much information on different ways that you should study. And I think just knowing that when you are approaching, like if there's some kind of method that you can find, giving yourself grace that in the beginning of any study period, there's going to be trial and error in how you're prepping and studying. You can try a study method and realize that that doesn't work for you and that's not the most, effective method for you. But being able to pivot from that and then kind of try a different study method is important. And just because it worked for someone else doesn't necessarily mean it's going to work for you. So just like embrace that like painful period of like trying and not enjoying a certain study technique or resource. So
Yeah. So, did you volunteer or work any jobs when you were in undergrad?
yeah, so I had multiple different jobs throughout my undergrad and then did volunteering as well. So kind of walking through, I guess, some of the jobs that I had. I came in my first year working at the rec center. I played tennis in high school, so I was interested in working at the tennis stadium, and I was able to string tennis rackets there. But I just had that kind of coming in immediately into college just to have something. And then within my freshman year, I got involved in research and I started doing research for pay and kind of bounced back and forth between doing it for credit versus doing it for pay. And then I started picking up different caregiving positions. So was doing some 24-hour shifts for caregiving. And then towards the end of my um, undergrad, I started working as a toxicology risk analyst. So then I started doing that at the end of my undergrad as well.
Do you have any advice for people wanting to do research as an undergrad?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many different opportunities for research, and it feels annoying at first without, having connections. If you're cold emailing and a lot of people won't respond, and that's just kind of the nature of the beast. But there are so many options, and really kind of stepping back and thinking about what you're really interested in like what area of research you're interested in, because potentially, reaching out to those people, but then also it's just don't get stuck doing research when there are so many opportunities in something that you're not as passionate about just because you want it to look good or have, that experience. I think it can certainly leave a bad taste in your mouth about research in general if it's not something that you're, fully at least enjoying the topic. Um, but I think just being able to reach out, find contacts, try your best to network, even if it's through a course that you're taking. If there's a professor that was teaching that, going up after class and then seeing if, they're involved in research and using all those avenues and to get started. And I think you definitely don't need to be started on that your very first year. I think just giving yourself some time to kind of make those connections is important.
Yeah. And then speaking of coming into college, what do you
Yeah.
think students should prioritize as a first year student? Because I know some people are like already trying to like figure out research, get a job, and do all of that before they even come into college. Or do you think that they should kind of slow down a bit?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. I think, obviously it's you want to be as prepared as possible and you want to hit the ground running, but I think there's so much. in the transition to college coming from high school that you don't prepare for, right? So there's the things that you transition in terms of your career and your school, but there's also just a very large life transition that that happens at that point. You know, you're living in a dorm, there's new social interactions, there's just figuring out how to live and function as a college student, I think is really important. And I think that's something that I really want to stress is again, so important to be able to give yourself that space and, time to be able to figure out how to function in that setting so that you don't just come in guns blazing and then like crash. Um, so really setting yourself up with a good foundation and whether that's, meeting new friends, just figuring out, getting into a flow and then building off of that. So I think it's a really kind of important slow build versus, coming in and it's great again to, have connections and have all of that coming into college. I think even if you have that, don't overcommit yourself at the beginning of college, I think is really important. And then just slowly build and add what you can um, as time goes on.
Yeah. So out of all the extracurriculars you did, was there any one of them that you think shaped you the most and was the most beneficial?
Oh gosh. I mean, I think a accumulation of honestly, all the things that I did were um, important. But one of, I guess, gosh, in undergrad, one of my favorite kind of extracurriculars, and this is a random one too, but my mom loved photography and I love photography as well. And we would go and volunteer at a dog rescue and go and do professional photos for the puppies at the rescue to be able to be adopted. And it was just so much fun. And honestly, it was I think that was one of the things that I was doing truly for fun, and I loved doing that. But I think it's experiences like that where you're not necessarily doing it to check a box or doing it to look great on an application. And of course, you'll have those things that you do to, look on an application. But in interviews for medical school, I think it's one of those things that people saw in the application that honestly came up in interviews more than other activities. And it was fun because I light up when I talk about it and it's fun to talk about. And and that passion and interest comes across. So I think it's really important and it showed me too, I kind of that hindsight where wow, these things I thought that I was doing that were, fancy and you looked good on application. It's those things that make you you on your application that people care about and want to talk about and um, that you can talk about easily. So I think it's important to hindsight in terms of kind of shaping then my activities I've done in medical school, like do the things that you're passionate about. Always explore those, always, be interested in pursuing the things that you like too. I think it's a really important thing that I learned and kind of shaped me in an important way.
Yeah. So you did your undergrad at UW Madison. Is there any specific advice you have for students doing pre-med here?
Gosh, I think I think kind of what I just talked about. I think there's this pre-med trap, and I think it's really easy to get kind of sucked up into, you have this application and end goal that you're working to, and doing this and this and this to for the sole purpose of looking good on an application. And again, not to repeat myself, but you will have those things that you do to be application boosters. That's, you don't get around that. But really, I think when you're in undergrad, just what follow what you enjoy. And again, going back to my friend who majored in English, like that was a joy and a passion of hers, and it was kind of stuck out on application as well, but in a different way. So I think just when you're doing the things that you enjoy and following the things that you enjoy, that comes across really well. And I think that's my piece of advice to just kind of try as best you can, taking a step back from kind of this like swirl of everything that is the pre-med world and doing following what you like.
Yeah. So what was it like starting med school and how hard do you think it was compared to undergrad?
Yeah, so it's interesting. So I did my undergrad at UW and then I did a year off doing research out at the NIH in DC and then came back to Madison. So I had a year between that I was kind of outside of Madison and then was able to come back. Um, and I think medical school is it's a different kind of challenge than I think undergrad. But for the first time, everything that you're studying and everything that you're doing is all for one big main purpose, and all of a sudden everything you're doing is relevant and for the most part, relevant to what you want to do. And I think it's more so of a volume issue in content that you're learning in medical school, that there's a lot of volume that you have to do, but you're not pulled in as many directions. I feel like undergrad, it's a lot of, really important time management, again, between volunteering, between work, between, um, having 5 different classes that you're in and all the different assignments for the different classes. I think in medical school, you go to lectures and you're just learning the curriculum, and it's completely a volume thing. So much is thrown at you, but I think it is a little bit more natural of a setup, and I think easier in some ways in regards to just the structure of the curriculum as compared to undergrad. Um, but obviously, has its own challenges then within clinical rotations and applying to residency and all of those stressors too. But yeah.
Yeah. So what year in medical school are you right now?
Yeah, so I am a fourth year medical student. I graduate in a couple weeks. I actually just recently matched into otolaryngology, head and neck surgery at the Mayo Clinic in Minnesota.
So your first 2 years are those ones where you do like way more academics and then it kind of shifts more into clinical rotations?
Yeah, so UW's curriculum, we do a year and a half of in class where we go to lectures and take kind of the exams based on the lecture materials. Then in a year and a half, we do 1 year of core rotations where we rotate through, the typical surgery, OB-GYN, pediatrics, internal medicine, things like that. And then we go into elective time where we get to, choose the courses that we're taking. And then, of course, you have the two board exams mixed in
Mhm.
there as well. So,
So you said you're going to go into surgery?
mhm. Yeah.
Oh, I asked, when did you realize you want to do that?
Yeah. So I came into medical school thinking that I wanted to do OBGYN, and had initially was involved in research for OB-GYN, and started then doing my core rotations and realized I liked a lot. And I loved being on rotations. I liked internal med, I liked pulmonary critical care, um, was kind of all over the board, but I actually accidentally got scheduled for a 2-week otolaryngology elective. And I ended up loving that rotation, but just wasn't quite ready to fully commit because I still had, so many other things that I was liking. But then as time went on, I just knew I couldn't get it out of my head, and I knew that that's what I wanted to do. And then I ended up deciding pretty late that otolaryngology was what I wanted to do, but kind of made a quick turn and went from there.
Yeah. So for what you want to do, you had 4 years of undergrad, 4 years of med school, and then how long will your residency be?
Yeah, so residency will be 5 years, and then I'm interested potentially in an additional 1 year fellowship off of the 5 years.
And then during residency, what does that usually look like?
Yeah, so so I will graduate this coming early May. I'll get my MD, and then I'll start residency. I am salaried you're paid as a resident. So finally, after the past 4 years of paying, and I will be a resident physician. Our first year is an intern year, or PGY1, postgrad year one. And for ENT at least, or sorry, otolaryngology at least, we do 6 months off service, so on different specialties, and then we do 6 months on service. Then after intern year, we have PGY2 year, and then from PGY2 to 5 is where we start doing our core rotations, both clinic and operating.
Yeah. So you said you took a gap year between your undergrad and med school where you worked at the NIH. What were you doing there?
Yeah, so during my undergrad, some of the research that I was involved in, as I had mentioned, I was interested in global health. So I actually ended up getting introduced to medical entomology, so working with vector-borne diseases. So the lab that I was a part of did both mosquito-borne and tick-borne. So I worked on the tick-borne side and did Lyme disease research. So I did that throughout undergrad. And then during my gap year, I switched from tick to mosquito and worked on malaria vaccine out at the NIH.
Oh, so for people taking gap years, do you have any advice on what they should be focusing on?
Honestly, I loved my gap year. I decided I think my junior year of undergrad that I wanted to take a year off. But I think and that's part of the hard part about gap year too is in deciding you feel like it's like what am I going to do during that year? I think there's so many different options and opportunities. I think it, it's it's honestly very much up to you. Like if you're not a research person, don't, you know, maybe force yourself to do a full research year if you're just gonna absolutely hate it the whole time, kind of thing. But um, yeah, honestly, I there's so many options for what to do during a gap year. There's probably not like a right right answer for what the best kind of option is for gap year.
Yeah. So, all right then. Thank you for joining me on the podcast today.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for having me.